glad to see you all here this morning. We're going to, as people kind of filter in and find a space, we're going to say a quick prayer to get our time going. So the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks for the gift of being able to gather together today, gathering together to envision how we can best spread your good news, tell your story fresh, that it will resonate with those who have yet to find hope and love through you. May we be beacons of that hope. May we take on the responsibility of our opportunity and help to change hearts and minds. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Garada. I'm the director of St. Michael and All Angels here in Dallas. And I'm joined this morning with...
I'm Yvette Peoples, and I'm the assistant to the director at Calvary Church in Memphis.
And we are here to offer a workshop that looks at the way in which we incorporate people into our congregations. We all just sat, or probably many of us, just sat in a plenary session where we talked about what evangelism is. Ideas about how both we understand evangelism and put it into practice. And one of the things that we want to be able to do is to kind of close that door at the end of the process. For a lot of us, evangelism is something that means inviting people, right? Bringing them into our churches, making visitors and things like that. But for many of us, we don't take that next step with intentionality. We don't actually both invite, welcome, and then make the connection for people in our congregation so that they are invested and connected in relationships with the people who are already there. And so we want to focus on the sort of end of that process so that we can be intentional. And one of the things that I heard in the plenary was that, we invite people to our space, invite people to our congregation, to our churches, and then we really give it over to God, right? We let God take control, and that is so nice, except I think that abdicates responsibility. I think that God put us here, God put us in our churches so that we can do God's work, right? And that work does not stop with simply welcoming a visitor who happens to show up in our pews. That work continues as we integrate that person into our community and allow anyone who comes into our community to change us for the better. So, we'll start with the inspiration for us. So, I was previously director at Calvary in Memphis, and so Yvette and I worked for years to develop a process that would integrate people into our community. It began when I attended an Invite, Welcome, Connect workshop at a national conference 3 years ago, probably 3 years ago. And when Mary Harmer showed us this idea, Invite, Welcome, Connect, it just clicked, and I said, that's it, right? It's this 3 parts. And so I went back, and Yvette and I, Yvette had served for years and years and years as the coordinator of our community, right? Kind of membership coordinator, community minister, really kind of focusing on parish life. And so we sat down together and I said, I'm so taken with the simplicity of ABC, right? Invite, Welcome, Connect. And it seems like we really welcome well. So at Calvary, there was a really good welcome process. Invitation was not being done well, and connection was not being done well. Invitation to me seemed pretty organic. That it was sort of, when you are fed in your church, you will sort of overflow with it. And we can program invitation a bit more. We can train people on how to speak, right? An elevator summary, or take advantage of opportunities when they come into contact with people at work, in the neighborhood, things like that. But that it seemed a harder nut to crack on the staff level. But the connection piece seemed like something that we could really take on, that we could create a system around connection and really get that going right away. So we started to plan what a flow would be. So the purpose, obviously, of connecting people to our congregations is growth, right? Growing the church. Many of my colleagues don't like to talk about numbers. Most of that is because it's probably depressing. But numbers matter. It's not the only metric that matters. You know, we can talk about spiritual growth and depth and all the other things, but numbers actually do matter too, because if we are telling this story, this great story, well, then people will be attracted to it. And I often say, if the story is not the problem, right? The story of Christ is the greatest story ever told. If that story is not resonating with people, it's probably the problem of the storyteller. All right, we need to be confident enough to own that we are the storyteller. And we can change the way we tell the story. And that was hit on the plenary as well. So the purpose is growing the church. We want to shift from this survival mode to a mode that thrives, right? That confident storytelling mode that will become naturally more attractive over time. And so we want you to take back to your churches. The hope that we have for you, for your church, is that the process we're going to unpack here for you it's pretty nuts and bolts. I mean, I'll be honest, this is not some kind of fabulous, sexy thing. It is really quite step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And we hope that it is scalable. There are lots of documents that we're going to be talking about, lots of manuals that we have developed over a few years, and we're going to make everything available to you. One of the exciting things that we found just this morning, we've given this workshop a few times in the last year, and this morning we were workshop at so-and-so earlier this year. I got all your materials, we're using them, many people, going through our integration program than we've had in years. And so I'm excited by that. I know that's excited too. And so we want to invite you to receive this as a gift. We intend it to be scalable. Whether you've got 50 people on a Sunday, you can just make it this big, you can just make it this big or this big. Still same basic idea.
Right. So after Chris got back from that National Arts work in Life Welcome Connect, and we sat down and we brainstormed and we strategized. What came out of that work was the flow chart, and I know that's really small and probably have a hard time seeing it. But for what it did for us was helped us kind of wrap our brain around the whole process. The goal of the process for us were concrete steps along this process to take somebody from a visitor through the invite process, all the way through the connect process, to have them be an engaged because it's not so much, people, you've heard about this, that you confirm people into the Episcopal Church, and then you say, good luck. The church officially is not the end, is not the end, it's the beginning. And we really wanted to find a process that would challenge them to go deeper than just saying, yes, this is the community that I want to be a part of, and yes, these are my people, this is where I want to be, but this is how I'm going to do it. And so the connect piece was the piece that Chris and I were so committed to try to figure out how to do it and do it well. And so this flow chart will be available to you. You can see it, and you can, the idea of it is that if it's on a process, if you commit to a process, it's harder to just, like Chris was saying, abdicate the responsibility for owning each part of that process. We're both very process-oriented people.
So don't worry, I know you can't really read it. But if you invite, so don't worry, I know you can't really read it. But if I know you can't really read it. But if you invite is one square. Invite is one square. And when we actually tried to put the huge amount of and simple, I mean, you have to really try to put the huge amount of and simple. I mean, you have to, the bottom line with all of this stuff, huge amount of and simple. I mean, you have to, the bottom line with all of this stuff, obviously, is you guys have to do this, right? I mean, we can talk about this a lot. I mean, you have to, the bottom line with all of this stuff, obviously, is you guys have to do this, right? I mean, we can talk about this a lot, and because you guys love to talk and think and plan and do a bunch of stuff, just do it, right? Just do it and be messy and fail a few times, and that's just fine. The process that we're going to unpack for you, we did this 4 times, right? I mean, that integration process we tried for about 6 months, and it was the 4th time we did it. that we finally said, oh, we like this. You know, finally we like this. But it didn't mean that the process that we went through to get there was a waste of time. It helped us to figure out in our own context how best this can be used. Obviously, welcome is important. Just 2 minutes is think about what you're doing to welcome people. So drop the invitation. Think about that moment. Actually do it. Not what do you want to do, not what you think you should. Not what do you want to do, not what you think you should do. What is actually happening in the door? What is that process? Think about in the door. What is that process? Think about it, and then turn to one other person. And you each have about 90 seconds to tell each other what is actually happening at your church to welcome people. And if the answer is truly nothing, then don't waste someone's time. Just tell them you're not doing anything, right? And that's why you're here, and that's okay, because that means there's only room for up. So think about what you're doing to actually welcome a visitor, and for about 3 or 4 minutes, we're going to break up into pairs. I want you to tell each other. If there's a way that you might talk to someone you don't really know, that would be great. Although I know some of you in here, and I know you're sitting with your friends, which is so Episcopalian. So take 3 or 4 minutes, pair up, and tell each other very specifically what you do to welcome people in your church. now that you have both your idea of what you do in your parish, and you've heard at least one other very shallow, explanation, but at least one other kind of idea about welcoming people, we want to show you how the welcome ministry works at Calvary Memphis. All right. So the first thing I will say, because this is going to be Yvette's section, is that investment in this kind of ministry really matters. Something that is everyone's responsibility is no one's responsibility. Right? And so it's sometimes easy to think that things like membership incorporation or welcome or anything like that is what everyone should be doing, which is, loosely sort of like mission and outreach, right? Yes, we're all supposed to be doing all this stuff, right? But somebody actually has to own it and be in charge of it. So at Calvary, work investment in the membership process, in the way that membership is maintained. And Yvette has been really the champion of that for over a decade. And so what she's about to explain to you is the kind of investment that particular parish makes. But I want to invite you to figure out how you will, in your context, also invest. That does not necessarily mean money. For many of you, you might be able to hire someone on staff. For some of you, that's not possible. It does not mean that's not possible. It does not mean that there isn't a lay leader or two or three that are actually tapped with a specific responsibility to do this ministry. That's investment as well. But to have someone who knows that if it works, they get the credit, and if it doesn't, well.
No pressure. No pressure. Chris mentioned that Mary Palmer's work within Right Welcome Connect was a kind of a pivotal moment in the way we did our welcome. For me, I went to an Andy Weeks, this is going back decades, the Magnetic Church, and that sent me on a whole new trajectory. He outlined a greeter ministry, and so the first thing I did when I was tasked with becoming the person who's in charge of this area of the church was create a greeter ministry. And if you don't have a greeter ministry, I highly recommend it. If you're looking to the clergy or just the staff to be in charge of welcome, it's never going to happen. It has to be down on the lay level. I truly believe that. We have in all of our paper greeter job descriptions and suggestions on how you can run a greeter ministry. It is fantastic for me in the work that I do to have my team that helps me every Sunday. If you can envision a church, I stand in the very back left corner surveying the church. We're blessed with one door that most people come into, so I have that. For those of you who have big canvases, you'll have to scale this. So I stand in the back corner and I survey everything that's going on, and I spend the first 10 to 15 minutes before the service starts seeing who's there. And I literally, people laugh at me. I have a steno pad and I take notes every single Sunday. I write down everyone who's there, everyone I see. If they're a returning visitor, if they're a member who hasn't been around in a while but has popped back up again, that's important, and I pay attention to that. And then at the end of communion, my greeters come and meet me in the back corner of the church, and I deploy. And that's the best part of this, because there's just me, and I can't possibly greet every visitor who's coming into the service. But I have a general idea of who's there, and I have my greeters. They meet me in the back corner, and I deploy. And that's the best. They do the work. They are the face of the church to the visitor. And I'm the person in the corner and managing that process. The best part of this process, and what I will say, that 90% of all of this is just paying attention. Having somebody who is that consistent presence every week, who sees the rhythm and the routine of the Sunday after Sunday. I think Calvary is blessed to have the resources to invest in that. I highly recommend that you figure out a way to invest in having somebody whose job it is to pay attention. Paying attention is 90% of it. The next thing I'm going to switch to, the best greeter job description, it's in the handouts, we can make that available to you. It's not rocket science.
You know, highly conscientious most often, right? I mean, it's most often, right? I mean, Episcopalians tend to be Episcopalians tend to be relatively conscientious people, which means they really, really hate to fail. And so, if you ask someone to be a greeter, go, that will feel really bad. They don't really know what the deliverable is, right? That they need to know, when do I show up? What is it that I'm supposed to do? What do you want me to give you at the end of the service? I mean, you've got to tell them what they are actually tasked to do. I want to give you all of these. It's not going to fit. I want to give you all of these. It's not going to fit exactly what you need, but it's in this particular parish, so that you can handle these. It's not going to fit exactly what you need, but it's in this particular parish, so that you can hand this to people in parish, so that you can hand this to people and say, when I ask you to do, and it's once a month, and it's once a month, and this is the deliverable. Right? They have done a good job that will feel good and be reinforcing, and then they will help others. They have done a good job that will feel good and be reinforcing, and then they will help others to join that ministry.
And that having been said, it's also not about the results. So much of it, the first years that I did this, I had my heart and soul into this work, and if they didn't fill out a visitor card, I felt like I failed. And if they didn't come back the next week, I felt like I failed. And so, kind of what Mary Farmer said, you invite them, and then you do have to leave room for the Holy Spirit. That even though I'm in process, and if I'm...
I want to reiterate the investment of a person that does what Yvette does. These people, I want to reiterate the investment of a person that does what Yvette does. These people in the pew, reiterate the investment of a person that does what Yvette does. These people in the pews who would greet a visitor, right? And in the pews who would greet a visitor, right? And probably most of our churches really do that well. If it's a small church, it's a little easier. It's a little dangerous. It's easy to figure out who's the visitor. But then the danger is you're like, hello, hello, visitor.
Yes. I shudder to think of all the people I turned off when I was
right, and it seems out. Well, on the flip side, if it's a big church, experience where they have welcome a visitor. Right? I'm gonna say welcome a visitor. Right? I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna do it. And they walk up to someone and they're like, welcome to our church. We're so glad you're here. And they look at them and say, I've been here for 10 years. Well, that feels terrible. And so, to find that nice balance, and so part of this is also training people what to say, right? You bet we'll get to this. But the point of this is to have someone whose real responsibility ministry, who is regular, and then can deploy the greeters. I just want to reiterate the deployment. What that really means is that if you are a greeter, you show up and you worship, and you've received communion. Before the post-communion prayer, you meet her in the back, and she says, okay, let's go say hi, person after church. And you don't have to say hi, person after church. And you don't have to make it intense and weird. You can just happen to walk up to them. But you have the confidence, right, to know I'm supposed to greet that person. And you don't have to worry about figuring out who those people are. Okay. Once that's all recorded, Yvette produces a memo that is like the best thing I have ever seen. And so she's going to explain to you what she does here. And I'll flip it to the detail.
Okay. So, after the greeters have gone and met with and said hello to all the visitors and so forth, the critical piece of it is that they have to report back to me. I'm only as good as the information I'm given. It's easier for them to, if I have 10 people out there getting visitor cards, they come back to me, and then I compile all that information. And that's the key. That's having the one person that filters all that information comes to makes a difference. And so I create this memo first thing on Monday morning, and it is a summary of everyone I've seen. Like I said, I've got my steno pad. I have my steno pad going back 10 years. And it's again, not rocket science. I just make a note of who I met, who was there, what their demographics are, what they're looking for, anything that's come out of that conversation, either with the greeter or with me, and I summarize it, and it goes first thing on Monday to the senior warden and to all the staff. And the understanding is that if it's a family with young kids, that our children's minister is going to be all over it. And I will have already put all their contact information into our database system, so that the onus is on our staff to find that information and run with it. And so if they're teens, then our youth person, and if they're any different demographic, the person whose area that is, it's their responsibility to take it from there. And I also, on Tuesday at our staff meeting, I talk about everybody who's come, so that everybody, we have a chance, because again, I'm just one person, and everybody else on the staff who are also Sunday morning people, they may have said, oh, everybody knows what was happening. Yes?
When your children's minister reaches out to the new family with children, are they required?
Knows what was happening. Yes?
When your children's minister reaches out to the new family with children, are they required to record that in your database so that you can check up on that process, or do you just trust that they've done it?
I wish I could say that they recorded it, but no, I really do. Again, we're a team. We have to trust each other that we're going to own our areas. Yeah. Yes?
How many services do you have, and do you attend all the services?
So again, it's scalable. For us at Calvary, we have 2 main Sunday morning services, and I do go to both. So again, if you've got 6 concurrent services, like some churches, you're going to need 6. You know, you're going to have to scale it. And if you've got 1 service, you know, it's scalable. All of this is scalable. So, oh, sorry. Yes?
I may have missed this, but what's your essay at Calvary?
350-ish. So it's doable. For us, for me, it's doable. I mean, at this point, after over 10 years, probably closer to 12 years of doing this every Sunday morning, I know everybody in the building. I know everybody. And my husband would joke that I know what kind of car they drive. I mean, it's, you know, it's, again, for us, it's a very doable size for me. So, scale. So that's the Monday memo. I think it's invaluable, and because it's a document, I can search it going back, you know, 12 years, and I can tell you who they were when they came. And the database does that too. But for me, this document is, these are my documents. These are in my words and my shorthand. And for years, if it's that tall guy who's got gray hair, who's so sweet and comes, that doesn't make it into the database. But I can search tall guy, white hair, and I'll find it.
I was going to say, what this does not show you is that sometimes it is just that, right? It's, you know, woman in her 50s with red hair. I mean, you know, sometimes you just don't know, you know, who the person's name. Because if someone really, really doesn't want you to know who they are, like they will get away from you.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so sometimes it's just a description, but like you said, it's totally searchable. And sometimes she missed the person. You know, another staff member may have found them coffee hour or wandering the hall, or needing to go in the memo and say, oh, I met them, their name's Rachel. In the memo and say, oh, I met them, their name's Rachel.
Right.
Or something like that. And so then she'll go back and fill those gaps in as best she can throughout that week, so that these documents really are searchable over years and years and years. And I mean, we've done that many times, where we go back and search a description to figure out that person did come here 3 years ago, you know, and it helps us to know who's coming and going. And you might see here, sometimes it's just there's no name. At least sometimes it's just there's no name. At least we sort of know that was a visitor from out of town, right? So we won't worry about it. But research is an important part of this job. Tell them what you do.
Yeah, this is the part that makes some people anxious. I am not above Facebook stalking. I am not above reading the property transfers, and I use every
She does
available
property tax
records to find out their addresses. I will use whatever means possible. I will ask and email anybody, anything. Who were these people? If I see a parishioner talking to a visitor on Sunday that I didn't meet, first thing I do, and not even when I'm texting that, tell me who that was. tell me who that was. You gotta use all your resources.
Because
You gotta use all your resources.
there has been a sea change over the last maybe 15 to 20 years, nobody comes to church by accident.
Yep.
Right? They weren't just walking down the street after getting a cup of coffee and thought, I'll go to church in this random church. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right? They have done their research. They have figured out, even if they're visiting multiple churches, that this is a church they want to visit. And so we start with the assumptions to be here today. And so if that means we've got to hustle a little bit to figure out who they are, sometimes in the back of the house, behind the curtain, this sounds very creepy. But when we have done that and actually track someone down, do you know how good that feels? Very quickly, meet someone who has been the first church. Very quickly, meet someone who has been the first church that noticed that I was a visitor.
I went to so-and-so church for 3 weeks in a row and no one ever spoke to me.
It makes a huge. Any other questions about that before you home?
And you guys know how visitors are. You've got the, like Chris is saying, they've already scoped you out, they've done their homework. The ones that want to be met and that are ready, that are in that kind of position of openness, they come 10 minutes before the service and they've got their prayer book and they've got their program and they're ready and they'll smile when you go up and say hello. The ones who aren't ready and who are still kind of, they come after the procession is already down the center aisle, and those are the ones that I just smile and say, I'm glad to see you. I really leave them kind of.
So we're about a third of the way through, right? And so welcome is important. We wanted to just show you what it is that Calvary does. So we're about a third of the way through. Right? And so welcome is important. We wanted to just show you what it is that Calvary does, of why we wanted to do this. Is the connection. So a reminder, invite, welcome, and then beginning in the upper right, it starts with the connection. We have identified, in essence, a two-phase, 2-year process that takes someone from first time they walk in the door, minded member of the church. Right? And that's what we're going to unpack for you next. Member of the church. Right? And that's what we're going to unpack for you next. But before we get there, we want you to, again, you thought about how you welcome. Now put yourself in the mindset of what do you actually do with someone. What I want to lift up is not newsletter invitations to confirmation class. You're not doing anything passive. What is it in a structural sense, in a systemic sense, are you doing to actually help someone go from, because belonging matters. We'll get to that in a minute. So think on that, and then we'll call you back. Tell them a glimpse of another way to do it. Go. Call you back. Tell them a glimpse of another way to do it. Go. Another way to do it. Go.
Okay.
newcomers into our parish. The greeter information, the stuff that comes back to me after a Sunday morning, the welcome card that they fill out, hopefully. Personal referral, again, what Mary Parker was saying, we've got to invite our friends to church. That's all part of it. So after I've compiled all that information, I sent the money memo out. The next step is disseminating that information. When Chris was there, it went to Chris, and it was an immediate phone call from the rector. It was usually a lot less than 36 hours. Usually Monday, by the end of Monday, unless stuff happens. But also, if the greeters were the ones who got the information to me, then I give it right back to the greeters, and they reach out to the people that they met. Again, feels less like a bureaucracy and a process if it's the people who are doing it. So the greeters hopefully reconnect with the people that they met on Sunday. Immediate personal contact makes all the difference.
From a priest. So your priests just have to get over it and do this.
It's both. It's both.
It's both. What'd you say?
You said from the greeter.
Yeah, the greeters do it and right. Right. So if I've gotten contact information from them, then they get added to our epistle list, which is our weekly electronic newsletter, and then our monthly chronicle list, which is our newsletter. The children's information, like I said earlier, forwarded to the children's minister to take responsibility from there. And then there, an email. Chris was good about distinguishing the kind of people who would respond well to an email and those who really needed a handwritten note. You know the difference in your people. You know who needs to get a handwritten note. And that always happened immediately. So within the first month, this is the flow chart. Now we're getting into the flow. After our principal service in a library, which is after our principal service in a library, which is comfortable couches and real. It's not a classroom setting. It's more of like a parlor. We meet once a month, and it was usually Chris or the rector or whoever with the visitors and then myself, and it was always a fascinating snapshot into what was going on in Chris's head at any given time. So it's basically, what's brought you here today? Where is the Holy Spirit moving in your life that brought you to the corner of 2nd and Adams today? And they talk about their faith. We answer any kind of questions. And that's what that welcome class starts to do. Not only the relationship between us as the representatives of the church, but also of the other. And that's what that welcome class starts to do. Not only the relationship between us as the representatives of the church, but also of the other people in that class starting to know each other and becoming the body of Christ together in that welcome class.
We wanted to make sure that people knew someone there. Right? So if you're friends with a lot of people at the church and you end up finally visiting, that's a very different kind of situation. In our context, we had a lot of people, because we were downtown, and downtown had a lot of both young adults and empty nesters, we found that a lot of people showed up really on their own. They knew about the church, but they didn't really know people in the church. And so it was important to, again, build the relationships, because although theology and liturgy and all of that stuff is so good, and we want them to know that, first and foremost, we want them to know people, right? We really want them to know a person or two or three, their names. And so that's why these welcome classes were extremely intimate. They were very regular, every 3 or 4 weeks. So you never had more than maybe 8 or 10 people, right? I mean, and it was visitor, join us for the welcome class. We did that. Visitor, join us for the welcome class. We did that, but rarely did anyone ever show for this one session, right? This was not confirmation class. This was nothing more than, who are you? And now know them. This one session, right? This was not confirmation class. This was nothing more than, who are you? And now know them. That was it. And now know them. That was it. And we just did it regularly so that people had a chance to just know each other, and the relationship started.
Did you ever have parishioners also at those classes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
there's a mix of new
Yes.
people and people who are.
Yes, I have a parishioner who it's what he likes to do.
Yes.
It's just to come and welcome people to the place that he loves. Yes.
And so you said your primary service, so there's not a service that follows that.
Right. This is during our education hour.
Which is why it's an invitation.
Right.
Because you may not just accidentally be there that time.
Yeah.
And so rather than doing multiple throughout a Sunday, there is this one moment where no matter when you come during the day, you were invited to that specific time.
Right, and where I have the 9 and 11, and the 9 always runs late, and that if it would be me doing it, well, I'm leaving quickly to go do another
Right.
service, and getting people to come back, after the later service at 11 o'clock is always a struggle. But that's kind of where I was going to find that person who can do that.
We have to be authentic about what we like.
Find that person who can do that.
We have to be authentic about what we like. I think it can be any. It needs to be any. It needs to be any. It needs to be someone that they see, though, right? I think that matters, and so that means typically, if it's not the rector, they've seen their headshots, they've seen them moving around, they've seen their headshots, they've seen them moving around in the dress and everything up there. And so to have that person, you really do care. Like they are a priority. If you are solo, I don't know, I think I have to tell you that you have to do this. Because it gives it weight, right? If you don't care to do it, and I don't mean that like because you're not a nice person, but it will seem like you don't care. And if you don't care enough to do it, then they will get that implicitly, sort of explicitly, right? You're not there. And even if it's for 45 minutes and you're there for 20, because nobody is under the impression that everybody knows what's going on. But if you can't, it's under the impression that everybody knows what's going on. But if everybody knows what's going on. But if you care to pop to leave to get ready, you came.
Yeah.
You came.
Yeah.
Right? That matters. Someone will really remember that. And that makes it feel like they are valuable.
Well, being able to pop in for 15 minutes that's a real connection for me.
Yeah.
Because, I'm dealing with that thing that I have to deal with, and to break away for 10, 15 minutes before going on, that's reassuring.
Yeah, I mean, even if you open the door and say, the Sunday school classroom's on fire, I would love to be here with you, but I can't because it's burning down. That matters, because you're simply not absent, right? You have cared enough that they are there. They have spent their time to come. And this is what, for those of you who are lay leaders in your parishes, I'm sorry to say that this is not always the easiest sell, right? Because most priests are very protective of their time. And it's very precious stuff. Because they're always doing more. It's dying. Because they're always doing more. It's dying. This has to be the first priority. This has to be the first priority. It has to be, right? Even more than taking care of people. Because the family takes care of people, right? I mean, this has to be the first priority. Because the stuff we have is so good, right? We want people to get it. Gotta do it. Good.
What's the method you use that's most effective to invite the visitors? Is it mail?
Email.
Email?
For sure.
Yeah.
Very few.
Email?
For sure.
Yeah.
Very few exceptions.
Yes. Moving on, within the first 2 months, they get invited to join a foyer group or dinner groups or any other kind of group, any kind of activity. You figure out relational, some way that they connect with other people, or a small group. Within 6 months, the next big step, the welcome class is the first step. The next big step is our discovery class. It is our confirmation class, but it's more than that. It is our Wednesday night. We're blessed that we have a big Wednesday night program with EFM and choir rehearsals and all of that. We have a parish chef that provides dinner. All of this is scalable. We invite them to people who visited within that last 6 months and some beyond. We invite them to participate in this discovery class. It's in our large fellowship hall. It's round tables. It's dinner. It's full of like circumstance, either young college kids, empty nesters, you name it, but by affinity group, and so that they can see other people like them in the parish that maybe they haven't met yet. That is available. We can send you a topic. A topic, usually led by the rector or any of the other clergy. A topic, usually led by the rector or any of the other clergy. A topic that's presented for the night. They discuss it. It's that 15 minutes or so of the topic, and then they break off into smaller groups that are random, completely random. So you have an empty nester with a college student and with a young mom. So that diversity of life experience is rich, and they in those small groups are invited to go deeper, to really unpack whatever question they were left with at the end of the discussion part. So,
How many of you know Alpha? Right? Okay, so we
Yes.
started with Alpha and watched those videos, which are the old videos. Apparently they're new ones, but the old ones are nothing short of tragic. So they
Careful, they're here.
sorry.
let's just put it this way, it did not go over in our parish. It
Did
was
not fit our
at all.
And it's difficult. I mean, I think it's difficult really to watch a video. I think that that's a detachment that is hard to overcome. So we tried that, and what we loved about it was the model of community, right? You share a meal together. And so what we did is we began to do it ourselves, and we sort of took the same skeleton of Alpha, and we did it live instead of using the videos. That still wasn't quite right. And so that's why I said it took us 4 rounds to get to where we really liked this process. It's grounded in that what is so great about Alpha, which is the relationships, right? The shared meal, you build relationships, and you're challenged with an idea. But we found that we did not really have a lot of unchurched people. What we had were a bunch of people who had disconnected for some reason. And so we had to take what I think is the strength of Alpha, which is people who have never really had a church experience, get a glimpse of what's there. We took it maybe a step farther to say, we know you kind of know the church, but whatever church you know has not been a great one, and we want to tell you what church could be, right? Kind of remake what church could be for you. And so we have dinner groups, and they shared at dinner. Those are the demographic groups. Then there's the lesson, which is where we actually do all the Episcopal stuff, right? It's the history and the theology and the liturgy and the words and all of those things. Then they break up into those random small groups. So in the course of an hour and a half, they've basically got 3 30-minute chunks that are both conversations and relationships with the demographic unity, a lesson, and then random relationships with people outside of their specific demography. And so they get this rich experience every single night, and we do that for a few weeks.
6.
Usually 6. But here is what we really, really want you to hear. All right, everything up to now has been sensible, right? I mean, like, that makes sense. Shepherd Society is something that we developed to fill in the gap from when someone has been interested enough in joining your church, interested enough in going through confirmation, interested enough in even potentially pledging. None of that's going to keep them yoked to the congregation over time. It's actually doing something with people, doing ministry that matters. So we developed what we call the Shepherd Society. That society, we raised up and trained groups of people in the parish to, in essence, it's like spiritual direction light, right? It's like diet spiritual direction. These people are trained to listen with their spirit, to kind of trust the guttural experience of the Spirit, and commit to one-on-one conversations with every new person in the congregation. So if you can imagine the timeline here, after about 6 to 9 months, they have finished discovery. Part of discovery is a spiritual inventory, and not a crummy one, a good one. And they have some idea, very broad stroke, idea of perhaps the direction they want to go in their own ministry. Once they have that, they sit down one-on-one, at least once, usually a few times, with their shepherd, whose sole responsibility is to help them flesh out their actual spiritual gifts in order to do ministry in the congregation. That can look like any number of things. So when I say ministry, don't hear outreach. That could be, but it's just something, right? Sunday school, altar guild, singing in the choir, soup kitchen, whatever. Just do something. And they've got an actual partner and advocate who they know now in that deep sense, who will make sure they are connected to that ministry.
Right. So the shepherds, at the end of those, usually minimum 90 minutes, several 90-minute blocks of time with their new person, the shepherds report back. So if it comes up in their conversation, if it comes up in their conversation, they really love to do flowers, they'd love to be part of the flower guild. Well, I take the responsibility of making sure that that connect is ready to reach out, and this is ready to reach out. And this is a big part of what Chris had to change the culture when he first got there, is making sure that all of your groups and guilds are open to new members.
Yes.
You cannot, this process will not work if we are raising up these new people and getting them all fired about doing something, and then they meet a brick wall of an altar guild chair who says, we don't need new members, we're just not, thank you very much. It doesn't work. So you have to change the culture. You have to make sure, you have to insist that your leaders recognize that the only way to grow, the only way to really be welcoming is to open up their groups.
So there's a two-part process there. The first is actually figuring out who is responsible for your ministries, right? And in most churches, that's not always clear for every ministry. Because someone used to do that, and others. I know at Calvary, we sort of had the model where if you agreed to take the lead in the ministry, like until you left the church, like it was yours. Don't give it to me, you do it, right? Left the church, like it was yours. Don't give it to me, you do it, right? That is not healthy. And so there are lots of people who, in name, were responsible for a ministry. They weren't doing anything for it. Forget welcoming new people in it. Like, they're not even really doing that anymore. Right? Yes, their name is there, but it's not there. So identifying who's actually in leadership is important. As you do that, clarifying that the expectation is that we welcome people into the ministry, that's not an expectation, it is necessary. You do not get to be in charge of a ministry if you will not welcome people into it. Period. The end. And you all had that nervous, funny laughter a minute ago, because you know that that is like nuclear situation in certain areas, right? This is where the church family matters. You cannot have your priest make that the necessary role of your ministry leaders. You're setting them up to be completely destroyed. As lay people, you've got to own the responsibility of your ministries welcoming people into them, right? It's critical, because you've got that one mean person who has their fiefdom and they're not budging. The priest cannot change that alone. It has to be within the community that you all say the priority here is that we are welcoming people in. And it has to be changed. That's something that can start right away. So that by the time you get to this place 6 or 12 months from now, you've sort of shifted that culture and you're ready to receive them.
Right. Very important.
So shepherds are a critical component to this entire process. They really are the link from I'm a new person and excited about the church to now I own this parish. Let's talk about belonging really quickly, and I'll try not to preach. But I think there is a critical difference between people attending a church and belonging to a church. And we have to be confident enough to say, Jesus loves every person, and every person is welcome in our church. Anyone can attend. But unless you actually not belonging to this church, and so to actually give. And that means giving in ministry and in money. So one of the things that we give, and that means giving in ministry and in money. So one of the things that we found when we raised the bar of expectations of people coming into our parish is that they were met. So from 2013 to 14, we doubled the number of new pledges, and the average of those pledges doubled, which we were very excited about. Then in 2014 to 15, we doubled the number of new pledges again, and the average of those new pledges more than doubled again. And that's only because we made the expectation that you doing something to commit to the church was not an option. Free stuff is sort of cheap, right? And I think sometimes we confuse inclusivity with a very low, cheap, free bar. Membership matters. And I think that part of this process is raising the bar of what we expect of our members. And as that happens, we are remaking the membership that is already there. So here's the strategic value of something like the shepherds. You raise up a dozen or so shepherds a year, which was our context. That number fit, about 12. Every year, you raise up a class of shepherds. The shepherd commitment being 3 years. So at any given time, you've got 3 dozen shepherds functioning, right? Once they're done with that ministry, they're done. But the formation they have gone through as shepherds sticks. So not only have you trained greeters, and you've trained people to host your classes for membership, you've also trained the people who are helping to connect those new members to ministries. Fast forward 10 years, the entire culture of your church has been radically shifted because you have trained the people already there to help welcome the people who are coming in the door. And that will fix a lot of these problems, honestly, once you've had those tweaks made.
Chris,
Yes.
what are you doing in 5 hours?
The training, there's the training.
Oh, Terry, sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
No, in
we
5
have-
hours, specifically that. Or just generally, what could you get done in 5 hours? All right.
Mostly what we're doing in that training is trying to get, in fact, okay, so I'll admit that I'm not meditative and contemplative and all that stuff. You know, I mean, that's great. I'll light a candle and everything, but that's not me. We had a great person in the congregation who was a spiritual director. And so she was a spiritual director and yoga instructor. And so she proposed that we get together and we do yoga, you know. What ended up happening, though, is that she made that training kind of what ended up happening, though, is that she made that training kind of an enlightenment moment for people about their physical connection to the Spirit. Because we're such heady people, right? We're intellectual, we think so much. She actually tried to shift in a very real way the physicality of the Spirit, right? So we would stretch and sit in a pose for 10 minutes in silence, and then talk about what we were feeling in the room. Some of this came about, so here's my personal story with this. I was meeting early on in my time at Calvary. I met with a couple. I would say the wife was in mid-50s, husband was maybe late 60s. And he was dying of cancer, you know, to the point where he's got a couple months, right? And so they were coming in to meet with me. First time I really got to know them to plan his funeral. And as we're sitting there talking about the ways in which they have lived together, the life they had shared, the connection and disconnection of the church and all that sort of stuff, he's talking about what he wants for his funeral. wrong with me? And I turned to the wife, and I say, you know what, when he's dead, I want you to come back and help lead some small groups and adult formation groups here at the church. And that just came out. And after I said it, I kind of looked at their shocked faces, and I thought, that's not super pastoral. And in that quiet moment where I thought, how do I backpedal out of this? He turned to her and said, that is exactly what I want you to do after I die. Sorry. And so for the last few weeks of their life together, that's what they talked about, was what her ministry was going to be when he was gone. And so she did. She came in and she started doing this coordination. And all I can say is that it just kind of, I am such an extrovert that I don't filter what I say. And there's a gift in that if we can learn to trust the physicality of the Spirit, right? And so that's a lot of what we do in that training, is it's not really say this, don't say that, that sort of stuff. What it is trust yourself. And get in touch with that gut that the Spirit, when the Spirit punches you to do something, just do it. When you're sitting in a conversation with someone and all of a sudden, boom, you know exactly what you should say to them, say it. Put yourself away, right? I mean, it's a little CPE style stuff, like, it's not about you. So when they talk about why they came to church because their mother said whatever, you say, well, my mother used to say, don't do that. But that's a very simple little portion of the training. And then, over time, the shepherds then help train the next set of shepherds. So it's not just a finite 5-hour training. What they do is they check in with each other at least once a year and kind of share the whole, well, you know what, someone asked me this. I wasn't entirely sure how to respond. And that's kind of like a casual wine and cheese kind of moment, right? We're just going to talk in confidence about their experience with the sheep. We need a better word. But they begin to be self-sustaining and self-creating because they ground themselves in that physicality. Does that kind of get at it? Okay, so a lot of what we have talked about is the front door stuff. It's critical that as a church we understand how to close the back door too, right? So we want to open the front door, welcome everyone in, connect them, incorporate them, integrate them into the life and identity of the church, and shut the back door so that people don't slip away without us noticing, right? So now we're not talking necessarily about the new people, although maybe. Now we're talking about the people who have, the lady who spoke in the plenary, she's not in here, I don't see her, who said like she's just completely bored with the whole experience, right? She's exactly the kind of person, she is at an Episcopal conference and she is bored. I mean, she is one bad week away from saying, I'm out. She will probably actually make that known. I don't know her, but the way she carries herself in the church downstairs, like she's going to make sure you know that she's out. Okay?
She's a 5-generation though.
She's probably not out.
She's loyal.
Right, but she's here to make sure that it gets better, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
She's vested.
There are people who are one step less vested who could just simply stop showing up.
Exactly.
How do we close that back door?
So this is again, I don't know if it's new to me, but this is something that I think has a lot of potential for helping us close the back door. Block captains. The idea of it is to engage in primary parishioner retention on behalf of the congregation. Have people whose job is just like I have my greeters whose job it is to see people who they don't know. The block captain's job on a Sunday morning is to see people that they do know who aren't there, to pay attention to who's missing on a Sunday. I'm going to flip it. So what you can do, I think, is, and again, I'm a process person, steps and so forth, divide your central space into blocks. Those are the blocks. And you get 2 captains for each block, because somebody's going to be out of town on a given Sunday. Person in block A is responsible for 3 rows in front of them and on either side of them. Because you know your people, they sit in the same pew, they sit in the same pew their mom sat in, their same pew, you know, and gosh forbid you sit in their pew, right? So, you know, people are creatures of habit. They sit in the same general vicinity every single Sunday. The people who are most like that, those are the people who you want as your block captains. The people who come up and say, well, have you seen so-and-so? I haven't seen so, that's your block captain. You know who they are.
You know, it's sort of the people who you probably wouldn't want to be a greeter.
Right.
I mean, that's right. I mean, the person who sees all that stuff, who's going to say, you know, they're the perfect people for this, right?
Right,
It's
because then you can bless it and ordain it and say, go for it.
Right, that
You know,
is-
give them a job. Right?
It's Gladys Kravitz is who you need in each of your blocks
Right.
around the church.
And their job is to pay attention to who's missing. Because you know how it is. People, it's like going to the gym. You skip a couple of days and you're out of the habit and you're gone before anybody even notices. We got to quit that. We got to make sure that doesn't happen. Because if something happens and somebody's, you know, they never tell us when they're sick, when they're in the hospital, or when something's going on, and then they're mad as hell that we didn't know about it. This is going to fix that. This is going to fix that. This is a way of putting that responsibility again out into the parish, into the lay people, saying, own your block, own the people who live, pay attention to who's not there, and let us know. That's the key. We can only know what we know. So
Then you back this up with the follow through, right? Who's going to follow up when someone's not there? It's probably relatively easy for the priest to do this, right? Because it is likely a pastoral reason. So from the same way that I always call, we are sending letters, and I'm making calls next week, actually the week after Thanksgiving. Anyone whose pledge went down this year over last year, we're checking in, right? Because I hope it is just simply, we can't spend that much or give that much this year. We're not unhappy, but I don't know. And so if it's just a fine, like, sorry, that's just it this year, great, just want to check on you. But if there's been a tragedy and you're supporting someone, or you've had huge amount of medical bills, or you're angry about something, or something happening, whatever, I want to know that, right? If we've got any tangible indication that there might be a problem, then we need to connect with those people. And it's obviously, oftentimes, I mean, any priest knows the whole story where someone, like Yvette said, they weren't there for weeks and weeks and weeks, and nobody noticed, and nobody called, and now they are super angry, right? Now, we can be pig-headed, like I want to be, and say, are you joking? You know, I mean, please. Or we can recognize that God loves them too, and that we do have a responsibility to, and say, sorry, you know, I wish we would have known, I wish we would have known, and want you back, right? And it's very simple to do that, but we've got to know, and especially the bigger the church gets, the harder it is. Again, people don't want to identify, they don't want to go up and greet someone who may have been there for years and years. There's also a fear that you're meddling in someone's business. If you notice that someone's not there, it's very few people nowadays will call them up and say, where have you been? But that they will pass on to a priest. And then we can follow up. And that's okay. I mean, you're not talking about a huge number of people. You might have one call a week sort of thing, right? This is not a dramatically high number. But it really does help.
I call it sheepdogging.
Sheepdogging. Yeah. It's very important. All right, so we just wanted to end. These were our 2 confirmation classes last year. Because we had put this sort of process into place. And like I said at the beginning, there are a number from parishes who have been at workshops we've done in the past, who just started using these things, and it really is helpful. And so everything will be available digitally. It's 80 plus pages of stuff. All the manuals and the curriculums and all of the job descriptions and everything, including the flow charts, will all be there, and you can just use whatever you like.
Where do we get that?
That's a great question. I think there's going to be a digital resource section following the conference, where any digital resources will just be listed.
Or you can always contact me. I'll be happy to get you anything you need.
I was going to say, if you email either of us, Yvette is at Calvary Memphis, and I'm at St. Michael Dallas. We actually have the entire thing in a Dropbox folder. We just send you the link, and you can download anything you want from that link. And that's what really the others have done primarily.
And I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people this last year. People who've called up because they've come to one of these and they say, okay, all right, I heard this. Did you mean this? Can I talk you through this? And this is how we're trying it. I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody at any time.
Yvette has also begun consulting. In fact, I'm having her stay over through the weekend to go to St. Michael. And we're having a big meeting after our main services Sunday morning with our leadership team for Welcome and Incorporation. Great resource if you wanted to invite her, then I think that that would be very worth your while. And so now we figured we've got 10 minutes officially. Questions, Sarah?
Yeah, you mentioned in one of those months the spiritual gifts inventory or whatever, and you said not the bad ones, but the good ones. Is that part of the resources, or can you tell us which one that is, or?
It's part of the resources.
I'm not going to tell you which one it is
Okay.
because we're not supposed to share it. But yeah.
I'm just gonna share this, like, to strike terror into the hearts of us all. A friend of mine moved recently to a sick community. She's left a hole in her church. She's dying. I'm the she's coordinator. She's dying now. And jumps in, wants to be involved, hit the ground running. Going to this church for 3 months now. She sent me a message on Sunday saying, I'm missing St. Mark's so much. Just left church, not one person spoke to us. And her son is an alcoholic.
Did you say she moved to Dallas?
No.
No.
I was sharing with my care partner here, oh, we're the friendly warm church. Like, we're known for that. And I thought, maybe this church also thinks that they're the friendly. We all think we're a big one.
Yeah.
Well, and it amounts to speed of response. I mean, it's really key to all of this. You've got to follow through because there's a young woman who just moved to New York. I mean, moved from New York to Dallas a few months ago, and she is openly church shopping. And I was the first. We were sorry, Dallas churches. We were the 4th Episcopal church she went to, and the first one where the rector responded to her request to talk. So I am very certain she's going to join now, and she was this person at her church in New York. And I knew immediately after she walked up to me after the service, and so I followed up with her that day on Sunday, because you can tell that person who you're like, sweet, I mean, that person you're like, I love you, and so that's, boom, and they're out there, and the person who even doesn't seem that way might be. Any other questions?
So I'm a full-time fundraiser, and I didn't really when I first started doing fundraising, I didn't understand the importance of the tracking and the data collecting. And it was, I was in a conference and I was talking to someone who is a famous annual fund manager, and they said, we only accomplish what we measure. And when I started really treating my database as if it was my life, and the data in it was precious to the point of invaluable, I realized that I actually improved my relationships with people because I was remembering not just where I stand, but where my organization stands, and sometimes they're the same and sometimes they're not. And I want to just throw out there that I think that while some people are like, oh, I don't want to throw this into the database, or I don't want to track this, it's too organic. No, you got to get it down, you got to get it in, you got to keep track of it, because it's going to make it better in the long run. That's to me, that's really the secret magic trick of what you're offering. Is a lot of people have done these type of programs before, but what you throw in is write everything down, track everything. Yeah, like
yeah, 90% of this is paying attention.
Any questions?
What software are you using to track that?
ACS. It's what we work. It's what we've had forever, and it works for us.
it called?
ACS, Automated Church Systems, you know, Shelby. Yeah. Shelby is the other one, the other big one.
Thank
Again,
you all.
that's scalable too.
Yeah, it's all scalable.
It's all
And spreadsheets
scalable.
works.
Yeah,
John doesn't
yeah.
have it. Thank you all very much for coming.